morning. A new report on human rights in Jammu and Kashmir, which looks at the period between August last year and January this year, makes the key point that hundreds, including minors and several elected legislators of Jammu and Kashmir, remain under preventive detention, and that there is near total alienation of people in the Kashmir Valley from the Indian state, and people continues. This alienation continues. The report has as its members Justice Madan Lokar, Justice Rumapal, former judges of the Supreme Court, Justice A.P. Shah, Justice Bilal Nazaki, among High Court judges, former Home Secretaries, former Foreign Secretaries, former Armed Forces personnel and historians. I'll be joined by Radha Kumar, the co-chair of the panel that came out with the report, and Anil Gupta of the BJP in just a few moments. But first, a couple of the main points, some of the key takeaways from the Jammu and Kashmir Human Rights Report 2021. Firstly, that something which is welcome. There's been a reduction in the total number of troops who were there after the status of Jammu and Kashmir was changed. 12,000 of the 38,000 additional troops flown in to enforce the lockdown have been withdrawn. However, hundreds, including minors and several elected legislators of Jammu and Kashmir, remain under preventive detention. Public assembly is still prohibited under Section 144 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. As of January 2021, unemployment in Jammu and Kashmir is at 16.6%. Statutory bodies for human rights, women and child rights, anti-corruption have not been reinstated. There is near total alienation of people of the Kashmir Valley from the Indian state. There is concern over the new domicile rules and reversed land laws. And therefore, there are key recommendations which have been made as well, and these are a couple of the key ones. Release all political detainees taken into preventive detention on or after the 4th of August 2019. Repeal the Public Safety Act and any other preventive detention legislation. Release all detained juveniles and withdraw charges against them. Curb application of Section 144 to only those instances in which there is a clear and present danger. Reinstate all the former state statutory oversight bodies and roll back the new media policy. Let me go across to Radha Kumar first. Would you say that the continued detention of political workers is perhaps the biggest continuing threat to the process of democracy in Jammu and in Kashmir?
Well, let me begin by saying that I think democracy was dealt a death blow in Jammu and Kashmir. I don't see actually any serious effort at restoring a political process there. I mean, talking about district development council elections, we're talking about a municipal level of representation, not an assembly or a real political level of representation. The detentions only make it worse. The fact that so many candidates were forced into what the Jammu and Kashmir administration called a form of protective detention, an entirely new category for all of us, it shows that there was a bias. Most of those candidates were from the People's Alliance for the Gupkar Declaration. They only had 6 vehicles available to them for campaigning. They had to get administration to agree even to access to those 6 vehicles. Other candidates from other parties were not asked to go into so-called protective detention. They were given police escorts, they were given vehicles. Even central ministers went and campaigned, most unusually, in what are basically municipal elections.
Right.
Whereas the candidates themselves from opposition groups were restrained and restricted in what they could do. Then we see that even after that, there are people who are being put in and out of house arrest all the time. I mean,
even today, Omar Abdullah was tweeting about that, about how he was. But let me get a response on this from Brigadier Gupta. Brigadier, Radha makes the larger point about how the process of elections in Jammu and Kashmir is certainly not what it once was. But the key point, or one of the key points in the release and the recommendation, is release all political detainees taken into preventive detention on or after the 4th of August 2019. Why has this not been done?
Vishnu, to maintain peace and tranquility and to ensure the law and order is not disturbed is the responsibility of the government of the day. Why they are keeping detained people, why the political tensions are being made, I am nobody to answer. It's not the Bharatiya Janata Party which is telling them to do that. It is the administration's pure decision to ensure that law and order is not disturbed. So the best person to answer this is the spokesperson of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and not me. I now come to the question of elections. I think this was the most fairest election which could ever be held. We have seen elections here in '87. We have seen elections prior to that. Now you know what happened in those elections and what today the J&K is undergoing is a result of those elections in '87. This time the elections were fair. I don't know from where Madam Radha has got this information that only 6 vehicles were provided. On your channel, Director General Police Dilbag Singh had confirmed that this was a uniform policy being followed for all contestants and not only for the contestants of the PAGD. There's a wrong input being given. Even our candidates are not allowed to canvass freely. They all were kept together and they are being given time and vehicles, joint vehicles to go to the conferences purely to ensure that no untoward decision takes place and the elections are held peacefully. So to say that there is a partiality and certain parties were favored, this is totally wrong. I don't subscribe to that.
Okay. Radha, just briefly to the point of cars before I come to the next key question. Yes, you had a point, Radha?
My point was that I am completely puzzled by the Brigadier's statement that every single candidate was put into this so-called protective detention. As far as I understand it from all the news reports, that is simply not true. 40 candidates of the PAGD were put into so-called protective detention. And again, according to all news reports, the vehicles available to those 40 were 6.
All right. Okay. So the other main point you mentioned over here, near total alienation of people in the Kashmir Valley from the Indian state and people continues. Rather, a lot of people on the ground would perhaps argue that yes, the status of the state has changed. People are evolving with the new times. They look forward to greater economic opportunity. How would you respond to this counter to what the report states?
All the facts show the opposite. A local survey that was conducted towards the end of last year said that 99% of the people surveyed, and I think that was a Kashmir Valley survey, but I may be wrong, it might have been the whole of the former state. 99% of them deeply resented the reading down of Article 370 and wanted it back. Now, when you talk about looking forward to economic opportunities, all the figures for the past 18 months show an economy in shambles. Jammu and Kashmir was actually a state that was doing rather well economically before August 4, 2019. It now is somewhere near the bottom of the heap. The Niti Aayog itself has categorized it as perhaps the worst area for the ease of doing business. Every set of figures that we have heard, either for 2019 or 2020, show a huge set of losses to every major industry in Jammu and Kashmir.
All right, lots of points there. Brigadier, one of the points is the rate of unemployment. This report says it stands well over 16%. And therefore, when one speaks about alienation, perhaps rather making the point that people are partly alienated also because economically they stand dispossessed at one level.
Firstly, I do not agree that there is alienation. If there was alienation, then there wouldn't have been such large turnout of voters during the DDDC elections. This was an indicator of people's willingness. Please, I didn't speak when you were speaking, madam. Please keep quiet and listen to me. You have your point, please convey your point later. This is the indicator. The entire world has accepted that as an indicator. The people with prejudiced mind, because what is the standing of this forum? These are the same people who have been propagating, appeasement. They are the pro-appeasement lobby. They do not want the true measures to be taken so that the economy and everything comes back on rail. 70% of J&K's budget was being financed by the central government, and she says it was economically upward state. 70% of the state's budget was being financed by the central government. The financial package given after the floods by the Prime Minister was unused. It was misused. The audit figures are coming now. How she can say that it was economically upwards? Economically, it's now on an upward swing. The government has made industrial policy. They have announced certain measures. The investors are waiting. It was because of COVID that we had a setback of 1 year. Jammu and Kashmir luckily has overcome COVID, and people are now willing to come in.
Okay.
Jammu and Kashmir is on a takeoff.
All right. Well, we'll see when it does genuinely take off. I don't think it's taken off so far. Let's hope that it does. The other point, Radha, I'm just trying to go from topic to topic. The report says repeal public. One of the recommendations is that there must be a repeal of the Public Safety Act and any other preventive detention legislation. Does this contribute to an atmosphere of constant fear in parts of the Kashmir Valley, which is why it needs to go?
The Public Safety Act has been criticized for many years as being one of the most draconian pieces of legislation in the whole of this country, because it allows people to be detained for up to 2 years, whereas in the rest of India, you cannot be detained beyond 3 months without charges and evidence being produced. Of course, it's another matter if various state administrations violate that. However, Jammu Kashmir was the only place that had this, and it certainly should have been repealed very much earlier. And I would actually hold the Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly to account on that, as well as, of course, the Parliament of India. Okay. As far as I just want to say to the Brigadier that every figure on economic losses has been drawn from government sources themselves. We have taken figures mostly from the Niti Aayog. As far as unemployment figures are taken, they are taken from the CMIE, which monitors unemployment month to month. And I should clarify that those are figures for December. In fact, in May, unemployment figures were 23%, so even higher.
Okay. Last point, because I'm running
Madam,
short.
I do not deny that. Just a minute. Madam, I do not deny that. You see, unemployment is not because of the calling off of 370. Unemployment has been there in the state for long. In fact, it's a result of 370. Because of 370, there was no private investment coming in, and there were no enough government jobs. So where would they get the employment? So unemployment is not a new thing in Jammu and Kashmir. So to blame it on post abrogation of 370 is not correct.
Yes, Radha.
There was another
unemployment in Jammu and Kashmir before August 2019 was at a much lower level. The figures shot up after you read down 370 and put the state under lockdown. The figures we may hope will improve in the next many years, but that is pure speculation. Facts are what we have been talking about, and the facts speak very clearly for themselves.
All right, so we don't...
I'd also be interested in knowing that unemployment in Jammu and Kashmir is twice that of the rest of the country, and that was not the case earlier.
All right, I want to move across to the next point. Brigadier, we don't have that statistic from earlier, so we can't progress in this point unless we had that. But I want to go across to one other point just before taking a break. 30 seconds to both of you. The importance of reinstating all the former states' statutory oversight bodies. How is this critical, Radha?
It's critical in the sense that it provides a statutory recourse for grievances. Now, every other state in this country, as well as most union territories, have such commissions. When the Reorganization Act was passed, these commissions were at that point wound up because they were state commissions.
Right.
But they could have been replaced with union territory commissions. And it's important specifically because there is such a high rate, comparatively speaking, of violence and human rights abuse in Jammu and Kashmir. People absolutely must have a place to which they can go. Putting all human rights issues under the National Human Rights Commission or women's issues under the National Women's Commission is making it virtually impossible for people to go with their grievances because of the distances involved. And of course, until recently, the lack of 4G made it even more difficult.
Okay.
But the truth is for recourse.
No, but I think that's a fair point.
Institutions on the ground.
Sure. Brigadier, would you not agree that the reinstatement of statutory oversight bodies is essential to promote law and order in any state? And if for whatever the reasons were, these were absent in Jammu and Kashmir since 2019, wouldn't you welcome them back?
No, I would welcome them back. But to say that distance is there because of distance and the national bodies are not effective, where it's incorrect. It's a digital era. In digital era, there are no distances.
No, but digital era is 4G came back last week, right?
Or do you mean till 4G was not there, there was no internet? There wasn't.
No,
internet.
but is not ease of use of statutory oversight mechanisms something which is important? I think the point is, if people had to travel to lodge complaints in a state where traveling in the past, in 2019 certainly wasn't very easy after 370, the changes which took place, shouldn't it be easier by reinstating oversight bodies which are spread across the state, district-wise? I think.
Okay, but see, I agree that, but I'm saying that 4G was only not available on mobile network. It was available, otherwise internet was available. Complaints could be lodged. I concede that point. I have one point. This is regarding the PSA. Who introduced PSA? It was Sheikh Mohammedullah in 1977.
And shouldn't you get rid of it?
State 1977? Listen to me, please. What was the state and circumstances in 1977 and what compare it with today? The law and order. I think PSA is needed today or was needed a few years back. Now with the situation improving, maybe that this is removed. But continuing PSA for so long, it was required. Otherwise, why didn't there were so many legislative assemblies, there were so many governments, why didn't they do it? Because they felt the necessity of it. Now, as the situation is improving, as terrorism is ending, as separatism is ending, the chances of PSA being replaced by some other act are there.
All right. I'd like to wrap this up. We've had a look at 3 or 4 points, and I'd like to thank you both very much for joining us. We haven't shouted and screamed at each other. I think that's welcome. We'll take a short break. Thank you both very much for being with us.